Hello and welcome back, Fortune Seekers. Today on the official Mega Moth Studios podcast, we're going to be covering part 2 of the invention of X Seekers of Fortune. In this episode, we're going to be covering our development of Heroic Feats, as well as deciding on the flavor of the game. And we're going to share the story of how we brought all of that back to Patrick, the original playtesters. So come along for the journey. Hello again, and this week, as with every week, I'm joined with Daniel Ayub, the co-creator of X Seekers of Fortune, and my permanent co-host. How are you doing today, Pat? How are you doing today, Danny?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, Joel. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I did a lot of laundry earlier, so I am actually kind of a little on the beat side. I go to a laundromat that I guess does not have a working air conditioning unit, so I was basically sweating through the clean clothes as I was cleaning the clothes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. And my girlfriend's probably not going to be too happy because I'm sure.
You're just sweating all over her clothes, or like what?
Maybe a little. Hopefully she doesn't notice. Hopefully it's drying by now.
I'm really feeling my eyebrows right now. I mean, I'm excited for you to see the video because I think you'll be feeling my eyebrows too.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, I think we got to have a lot of eyebrow action here. You know, get one up, the other up. You know, I'm a real lefty when it comes to my eyebrow. I can really like raise that left one, but the right one, it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do much with my eyebrows. I don't. I'm trying, but it doesn't have like the thing The Rock can do. You know.
Yeah.
So, you know, whatever.
Something like this.
I can't. Yeah, I mean, presumably, I don't know.
All right, Danny. So today we're going to be discussing we're basically going to be recounting the story of the creation of X Seekers of Fortune, but we're going to be picking it up from where we left off last time to remind the audience, everybody at home, we got up to the point where we had designed a very early working prototype of the game in Tabletopia. And after we had run that a few times through the paces and thought and understood how the game worked, between the two of us, we took that to two playtesters, one of them being my brother Nathan, and another one being our longtime friend Patrick. And the feedback they gave us was, you know, I would say gave us inspiration to design the game further, to keep going with our game design, because essentially it was like, if I remember correctly, and you know, you can fill this in, their feedback was, okay, that felt like a game, but it also felt like a game that I didn't have so much agency in, which, you know, we took very seriously because, you know, agency in but agency in gaming to us is what makes a game fun.
Yeah, it's absolutely imperative that players' actions matter. I mean, why are we playing games? I mean, if you know, we're just going through the motions and everything is deterministic, I mean, we might do that once or twice, but really it's like watching a show, right? Once we've seen what it has to offer, that's it. We're done with it. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Agency is everything.
And not every show can be Mad Men. You're not just going to keep watching it over and over again.
Well, agency and fun is everything. I don't know. You could have agency without fun. I don't know if people want to play that.
That's true. You do need to balance out the two. We can talk more about that for sure in our coming episodes because there's probably a big discussion, debate to have about that topic. But an even bigger discussion, debate to have is the question of the week.
Ooh,
yeah.
Question of the week.
Yes, sir. We gotta have some icebreakers to get everything started. So
break that
I
ice.
thought this one, yes, sir. And I thought this would be a great one with the new Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out. And it's no secret that Indiana Jones and that franchise has been a big inspiration on our game. And we're probably going to end up talking about that when we discuss the flavor of the game and how we came to it. But I thought I would ask you, Danny, to you, what is the best Indiana Jones movie?
Oh, okay. That's a good one. So do I get some liberties with answering this?
Well, I originally, I think when I pitched the question to you originally, I said, besides Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I am a big believer that that's personally my favorite, but you said you wouldn't need that stipulation
no.
To have a unique answer.
So on the whole, and again, this is not a commentary from like a cinephile standpoint. This is just from like my own personal preference standpoint, which I think counts for something. Yeah, I'm a big Last Crusade fan. I really like, the whole Grail concept. I like the father-son dynamic. I like, the trials and tribulations at the end of it. I mean, just everything about The Last Crusade really just kind of strikes right for me. But I will say
Yes.
that I think that the
Mm-hmm.
opening sequence to Temple of Doom is probably the best opening sequence of any indie movie thus far. I'm waiting to be uh, aroused by the Dial of Destiny. I probably could have chose a better word there, but I think
Feel free to go back and choose a better
no,
word.
we'll let that one go. That's fine. I think
Okay,
people
okay.
people can
I know there's a lot of hype about the beginning of the Dial of Destiny. If I hope this isn't a spoiler in case you're watching this video before it comes out. But I believe they've already revealed that all of the cold open of the film is going to be the de-aged Harrison Ford for like a 15-minute cold open, maybe even so similar to Last Crusade, where it starts with him as a younger man and then we'll fast forward to him as a much older man. But I'm actually I have no almost no argument against your answer because I am a Last Crusade fan as well. I granted it's definitely a nostalgia thing for me. I haven't watched the movie in quite a few years. In fact, I mean to soon because I'm really hyped about the new movie, and the game has gotten my blood boiling for Indiana Jones and his adventures. But the Last Crusade was just one of those things. It was one of those VHSs that I owned when I was like 5, 6, 7. I wore that thing out. I'm sure as it was probably the movie as a kid that I could quote the most. Though I do recall when I saw Raiders, like really saw Raiders, for the first time like as a preteen, and I did the same thing. Like then it's like when I was like 11 or so, I saw Raiders for the first time, and I probably saw it 50 times within the month after I saw it.
I mean, every single one of them is great. They all have their different things
Mm-hmm.
that I love about it. Like Temple, the opening short round is amazing. That scene where they're eating monkey brains is amazing. The rope bridge is iconic with the crocodiles. But if I can, I'd like to share one of my favorite Indiana Jones memories.
Sure.
So the producer of this show, William, and I had an opportunity to go see a triple feature at the Paramount Theater in Austin and see Raiders, Temple of Doom, and Last Crusade back to back to back, and that it was one of the best cinema experiences of my life. And
Wow.
yeah, Will and I definitely share a deep passion for Indiana Jones. And that's actually one of the most exciting things about our July 1st event in Norman, Oklahoma. The pregame for that is going to be going to see Dial of Destiny opening night, the day before we're there with William in Oklahoma. So I'm super stoked for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is that. Yes, I am very excited. I didn't get to go to that Paramount triple feature with the two of you, but I'm really excited that we're all going to be going to see the new movie together with William, his family, the two of us. I think your brother's going to be there too.
Yeah, Luke will be there. Luke will be there. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting time, I think.
Excellent. Well, I think we can both agree The Last Crusade, probably the best Indiana Jones film. I think we can both agree on that. And I'll say Temple of Doom, definitely the best opening sequence to a movie, or one of the great opening sequences to a movie. Just so much energy, so much drive all the way up until they get on that plane. Well, since we were talking about the Indiana Jones and the flavor that we were inspired by, we should probably jump into today's topic, and we're going to be, as I said earlier, we're going to be covering the flavor of the game of X Secrets of Fortune. It moving from Lost Arts, where it was a game about, I guess, kind of wizards or folks finding magical spells, which we didn't really have any art for. We just had that broad theme. And when I designed cards, I even tried to shy away from that theme by naming them things like Silence the Ego and was it like Embrace the Shadow Self
You had a
or Embrace Your
big
Shadow?
psychological influence, I think, when you were naming your cards. I could tell in that first batch of cards you were kind of trying to do something more Jungian.
Yeah, I was definitely on a Jungian kick. I mean, as we all should be. Everybody should go through a Jungian phase for sure. You had pitched a game that was about people finding old spells and casting them, and which was really exciting. But I think I was pushing back fairly early on. I didn't want I might have gone through the looking glass on this, but at the time I wanted to design the game's mechanics first and then have a theme sort of coded over them to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I first started conceptualizing the game, fantasy is, to your point, like just a very standard jumping off point for games like this. And in my original conception, I really wanted the game to feel like early Magic, like 1993, 1994 Magic, where, one of the things that drew me in when I was a kid looking at cards for the first time, I mean, I can remember looking in a case at a game store and seeing a Black Lotus for $99 and just wanting to buy it for some reason. And I wish I had, but Mom.
Yes, we all do.
Said no. So, whatever. No, but to me, those early days, when you held a Magic card, it was almost like you were holding that artifact, or like you felt like this actually could produce the spell on the card. And the game just felt really like mythical. Like now, to me, for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's bad. It feels like it's a fantasy novel, or it feels like fantasy pop culture to me now. But at a time, it felt like real magic, like actual magical items. So I wanted something that was evocative of that. And I really liked the idea of lost civilizations and this idea that they were trying to recover, magical knowledge from the past. And I think that plays into what we eventually got to on some level. But the intermediate steps, when you first raised the point of, hey, like, do we really want to do another fantasy Magic game? Can we do better? I took notice. I think that rang true. So do you remember any of the things that you pitched at that time as potential alternate flavors?
The big one I remember being feeling very strongly about, to the point where I think we're still going to make this game with this theme, maybe modifying the match engine, is I wanted it to be like a game, or game about characters getting into and trying to each other with the what are now adventures. I was imagining those as the that you would have to perform in order to produce a big and that sort of thing. I was just imagining that with maybe an anime chibi kind of art style. I think you wanted something, like you said, you wanted Magic circa 1993, and that was a little more cartoonish and a little more, I don't know, campy, maybe we could say, than what you were looking for. So I realized at a certain point, I think I made the negotiations like, okay, Danny, obviously you don't want to go with yet, but we will make later, and that allowed me to file it away. And I would highly recommend, if you run into an impasse with your creative partners, especially if you tend to fire on all cylinders with them, don't let something don't die on hills like that. Just be like, this is a good idea, we can get to it eventually.
I think that's a great point, actually. And I just want to jump in here, because I do think that this is actually one of the core dynamics of our creative relationship that has made it so productive and successful over the years, which is we are very, very good about, when one person raises an objection, not trying to bull the other person over. Like, if we think it's really important and we don't feel like they're fully connecting the dots, we might spend a little bit of time saying, hey, hold on, let me make sure I have a clean pitch on this. But once, it's clear that we're both on the same page about what the idea entails, if it doesn't work for both parties, we very rarely will attempt to die on that hill, as you said. We are, very, very, we're creative types, and we believe that there is, always another way, and probably another way that we'll both like. So anyway, sorry to cut you off, but I do think that that's a really important dynamic to why we've been successful creatively over the years.
And I think we've gotten better about it as we've gotten older too. I think it's something that comes with maturity, and just realizing, I'm going to have, if you're a creative person, you're going to have just ideas out of the wazoo, and you're not even going to get to all of them. So no reason to, kill a project, because you're not getting that one good idea, through. It's just not resonating with, your partner or the other people you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the early pitches, and I think you probably pitched the Indiana Jones adventure world, and it immediately resonated with me as being a viable alternative. I mean, maybe it's because, again, I'm a sucker for indie, but
know your audience,
yeah, know
folks.
your audience. But no, like again, like one of the things that really tickled me about the original concept of Lost Arts was this idea that something had been lost that was important, that was more advanced in some way than what was known to exist in the modern world, and people were seeking it. And I think you can see a very clear line between that, core idea of that fantasy game and, Seekers of Fortune. I mean, this game is still all about seeking. And as you will see in subsequent sets, regardless of what the setting is, because not every expansion of X Seekers of Fortune will be set in this world. But what will be common throughout them all is it will be people seeking something for fortune, for fame, something esoteric, something legendary, something interesting, and so you can see where that through line gets us from Lost Arts to what is now X Seekers of Fortune, but at that time was called Adventure X, and that's a story for another day. But
Okay, so some of the things that changed was some of the things that changed when we decided that the theme was going to be this Indiana Jones adventure world, where, and I say Indiana Jones, but we early on I put in also the Mummy, like with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, was like that was a huge influence for me. In fact, I wanted the set. Initially I wanted the set to be all Egyptian themed.
at some point, I think we started to view the game as a vehicle to create cinematic moments, to create an opportunity for players to live through a narrative of a certain genre. And that genre in this game is action adventure in all of its manifestations. And so the adventure is very obvious, right? But the action, where does the action come from? And all the action comes from, well, I don't want to say all of it, but a good amount of it, and certainly the unique genre trope type action comes from this third deck, which was the Action X deck, because there's a variety of things in it, and all of them, give some level of action to the game.
I think the idea was like what gets you through an adventure. What do you follow? And like one of us came up with the idea of you follow leads. You're following. We thought also clues, but clues felt a little too specific. We wanted something broader, and leads. I got a lead for that hot story. That's something a journalist would say. It's something that Indiana Jones would say. It's something that a lot of different kinds of adventurers would follow leads. And we were looking for something that I think our litmus test, because we do want to set this in different worlds. There's this same game mechanics but different worlds. Our litmus test was always like, would it make sense in a fantasy setting, and would it make sense in a science fiction setting?
Exactly, and that it holds true as we move to the second part of our conversation later about naming the heroic feats. Things have to feel like they can be set in versatile worlds. That's the reason we moved away from quests. And one of the other things I remember is that at some point, we were talking about, was it the directions? Is it north, south, east, and west? And we went through lots and lots of different things, and we had a really deep conversation about, what it is that really propels you on an adventure. And what we ended up with is the leads, and kind of as you alluded to, we wanted to talk about motivation and inspiration. What is it that, leads you on a journey? And it's not just one thing. There are a variety of things that lead you. Some people are motivated by a grand vision. Some people are motivated by, what they read. Other people are motivated by, what they find in deep holes in the ground. And other people, just have this sense of mythology that they believe, there's truth in. And, as we had this conversation about all the different ways that people find themselves being oriented in life on adventure, we settled on the four leads, which are, Joel, do you care to?
Yes. So the four leads that we settled on, you pretty much hit them all, but let's just lay them out cleanly for the folks at home. We have vision, glyph, ruin, and myth. Now, those four, I'll do my best to kind of sell them with maybe a moment from Indiana Jones or another franchise. So let's start with Ruin, because that's the one that is like the most Indiana Jones like. With Ruin, we imagine being like uncovering, uncovering a dig site, and finding the what was left behind. I often think of the Colosseum in Rome or the ashes of Pompeii. Things like that, or the pyramids themselves. In some ways, are ruins that were left behind. So I guess that would be what would you? Is there a moment from Indiana Jones, any of the movies that you think of as Indy using ruins to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Staff of Ra is a good example. I think, um, any time when he's studying, hieroglyphics, even though that kind of starts to go into glyph, and that's something that you'll find with all of these is, very rarely is any one following one lead. And that's part of the reason why we need to use all the leads during the course of the game, right? Like, there are people who are, much more motivated and inspired by one over the other, but generally speaking, we all dabble and in all of them.
Yeah, and that, I guess I would take us to glyph, because I have an example that could be interpreted as glyph or ruin. But so glyph, I consider glyph to be the recorded record that's like looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, or finding the Dead Sea Scrolls, I should say, or translating the Rosetta Stone. And one that I always point to in Indiana Jones, I guess they kind of go together, they flow together. Maybe this in sequence itself could illustrate following all the leads to get to your destination. In The Last Crusade, Indiana Jones goes to a library, right? And at the library, he finds, what is it? He follows the numbers of like the aisles to find the X that marks the spot. So that I was always thinking of that as being him using a glyph, but that actually might be more like him using the ruins left behind.
Do you think that we can consider that product placement?
I hope so. George Lucas, get at us. Well, I guess not. Kathleen Kennedy.
Wait, whoa, hold on. What does that entail?
Yeah.
If we're saying it's product placement, do they then just send us like a bill? Like, I'm not sure I want an invoice from those people.
I mean,
never mind. It's a Roman numeral completely unrelated to X Seekers of Fortune.
Exactly. It's 10. 10 marks the spot. But then he goes down into the catacombs, very, very scary, with all the rats, and he finds the other half of the shield left behind by the Knight Templar in his tomb, and he uses his pencil to get the script, the scribe on it, to complete the half that he had, so he could read the entire message. That would be a glyph following a glyph lead to complete an adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, what about Vision? So Vision. Is that something that you think that we can find an example for in Indiana Jones, or do we need to jump to another franchise? What?
That's a good question. Let's walk down this path, but let's first set up what vision for us means. And for us, vision is literally, having a vision, having a dream that is prophetic, or maybe going on a vision quest and like finding your way through a vision quest. It's probably the most retro futuristic one. It's like the industrialist would be a vision character. I think we often say Tony Stark is our go-to character for explaining what vision is, because he has vision. He has a vision of making the Iron Man suit, and he dedicates himself to doing it. But Indiana Jones, being so down to earth, he doesn't really do much in the way of, that sort of like, spiritualizing, if you will. But I mean, another character kind of follows a vision in the Indiana Jones movie we haven't referred to, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull.
What movie is this?
Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull?
I don't know that one.
Okay, well, let me tell you. I'll tell you about it sometime in the future. But basically,
no, it's okay.
Yeah, okay. But Indy, maybe not Indy himself, but one of his companions kind of follows a vision, has like a vision quest of sorts that he's following through in that movie. And then that leads us to our final one. I think the one that has the most weight to it, myth, And this for us is like literally, it's like if glyph is following the written record, myth is following the oral tradition. The stories that are passed down, that have been passed down for generations, that nobody knows the beginning of. They don't know how they've changed. We say Homer wrote the Odyssey, but in all honesty, it was a
It was
story
Marge.
passed down.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, no.
so it was a story passed down, and there's plenty of other examples. I mean, we all have the tall tales of America are myths. Um, the
I have a
the
great example
oh,
of
good.
myth from Indiana Jones, actually, if I can
Oh yeah, please
suggest it.
do.
I think of that climactic moment where Indy's standing in front of the ghost of the knight who's guarding the vast array of goblets, and any one of them could be the Grail. And the guy who's the villain in the movie obviously goes for the most opulent one and drinks to his death. But Indy is trying to figure out which one it is because he's got to solve it. His dad's out there, he's dying. It's the only way to save him, and he's telling himself, like asking himself, okay, like what do I know about Christ? And he's a carpenter, and he's thinking about the story, and it helps him hone in on the most humble of goblets, which he drinks from, and it turns out to be the life-giving goblet, the Grail. And so that's an example in my mind of how someone might use myth to guide them towards, that ultimate fortune they seek.
Yes, exactly. And so in one movie we have a character following ruins left behind to get glyphs to lead him on his adventure, and that he needs to utilize myth, the power of myth and the stories that have been told to him by his father and by his culture in order to make the right decision. The only thing we're missing from that movie specifically, and if we were to go back and watch the movie, which I should do soon, I bet you I could pull a vision moment from it. But to
From
say
Last Crusade.
from Last Crusade, but
There is something to,
mhm.
you kind of used it for glyph before, but I mean, it's the observant, the realizing that X is there, that 10 is there the whole time. I mean, that there's a sense of vision there, you know.
All right, yeah, Danny, that's a really great point about how vision did come into play in The Last Crusade, and that gives us one movie that demonstrates all the leads and how they would be used by an adventurer to, complete his adventure. So, with that, why don't we transition into the second part of this episode? We're going to talk about heroic feats and how we develop those to give the players much more agency. Do you remember how it started?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the confirmation that the heroic feats were necessary came from that first playtest. We knew coming out of that game that, the most salient piece of feedback we got is there's a lack of player agency and we have to solve for it. Prior to going into that playtest, I had already started thinking about what would become the first couple of heroic feats. And at that time, in my mind, and for a long time, they were just called special player actions. And the idea would be that these are player actions that are always available to you that you can access through discarding leads. And the ones I knew that I wanted to see in the game was thwart, which was a way for you to counteract your opponent's feats because it felt like those can't go unanswered. We had designed some very, very powerful, some might say broken, feats at that time, and they can't go unchecked. And likewise, same with the relics. And so I had said, okay, we need a way to counter things and we need a way to destroy things that are in play. And so we had come up with thwart, and then we had two actual different special player actions for getting rid of relics because at that time sites did not exist, and that was called lay waste. And then there was a separate one that did almost the same thing for adventures, and that was called send astray or set astray, something like that. And eventually we got smart about it and realized that those should just be the same thing. And at some point it became sabotage. But yeah, thwart and sabotage, proto sabotage, were the ones that I kind of had been thinking about going into that playtest. So then, Joel, do you remember from there what the next one was? How, because there was one you were thinking about, if I remember
Yeah, yeah,
correctly.
yeah. So, just to expand on what you were saying, just to put a point onto one of the things you were saying there, yes. Sometimes you have to take, how should I say this? Sometimes you have to, go through the long, hard process of doing it the complicated way to refine it to elegancy. So, like, we did need to go through that process where sabotage was two different things because there was a lot of answers in like the rules to answer for us to figure out before we could make one heroic feat that did two things. And I'm sure we'll get more into that when we get into the nitty gritty of game design. But what I was thinking about at the time, and you want games to be close. You want it to feel like both players have a chance. If a game has too many play sessions where it's a runaway success for one of the players, I think that's bad. You need to have a way of letting the person who's falling behind catch up. So I was devising, like, from my experiences, it was really hard to reload on leads, and when you paid for them, if you paid to thwart somebody's action X card or their feat, you were behind, and in leads, and it was very hard to catch up. So I devised the feat that came to be known as Dig Within, that you could only use when you were behind in the game, at least back then. Now it's when you're behind or tied. But you could scrap or you get rid of one of your maps, basically sacrifice one of your maps, or adventures, as they're called, and draw two more leads. And it really changed the flow of the game because, after, like, if you do that 2 turns in a row, you're reloaded.
It makes all the difference in the world when your opponent has to be wary of what you might do to them on, and how you might interact with them. And it's very difficult to design a game that is supposed to be competitive without feeling like there's a way to really interact with your opponent. And Sabotage and Thort did that. And one of the things about the way the game is designed is you can do whatever you want on your turn, but you will run out of resources. And in the early game, it was way too easy to just get completely exhausted on resources, and then it was just slow reloading. And that's why what originally we called the catch-up mechanic and then eventually became Dig Within was so important to that, fixing that element of the game. And then the latter three sort of each came in on their own to solve different problems.
I would say that, sorry to step on you there a little bit, but I would say that the reason each and every one of these was developed was because we were running into a problem in the game that was taking away our fun or making us feel like we had a lack of options. So those first three came quick, fast and furious. We had them within a few days of opening up this design space. These other three took us hours of play testing to identify these problems and slowly develop a way to address them. So why don't we dig into those now?
So yeah, absolutely. So let's dig in. So there were three. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to walk us through what they were, and what was the problem we were trying to solve and what the solution was. So the first one was meditate. And what meditate does is it allows you to discard an action X card from your hand in order to look at the top three leads of the lead deck, choose one, and then bury the other two. So it gives you some card selection. The whole reason why meditate is there is because there were some cards that were great, at the beginning and the middle of the game, but depending on when you drew them, if you drew them too late, they were just stone cold worthless. And that's a terrible feeling. You're going into the late game and you draw a card off the top of the deck and it does nothing for you and you can't do anything with it. It just was a feel bad. It felt like it was a wasted resource. And so we developed Meditate, in order to solve for that. And make sure that there was always a floor that was reasonable no matter when you drew any specific action X. And it freed us up to not be so worried about making sure that cards were good at every point of the game. So the next one, do you want to tell a little bit about Infiltrate?
Yeah, I think Infiltrate was like one that was a long development process because we knew, I think, right out of the gate when we were developing the special player actions, we wanted there to be a way that you could gain information on what your opponent has in their hands to kind of, see if you had the all clear to, play your card because they don't have a thwart in hand. The thing about this one, we often talk about having to turn the dials of cost and an effect. So what we knew was we wanted you to have a way of interacting with your opponent's hand. What we didn't know is how much should that cost you, and what should you get in return. Was it worth a lead just to see your opponent's hand? Was it worth a lead to see your opponent's hand and make him discard a lead? We played with some of these, and when it was just to see the hand, nobody was using it. When it was one lead to see their hand and get them to discard a lead, it was abused. So eventually we got to the point where, and I think these two things sort of went together in the final stages of really shaping it into place. We decided, well, no, I think the first thing that happened was we were like, we don't want this to be abused as much as it is. So Infiltrate now is like Dig Within. It sits behind the stipulation that you have to be behind in the game. And later updated to tied or behind in the game. But that still was a little too good. I discard one lead for you to discard one lead. It's how should I say? It's not. There's no negative tempo to it. I draw one lead every turn, and if I want to use that lead to make you discard a lead, then you discard the lead that you drew that like last turn, and we essentially both stay. What is the term? We stay where we are. We realized that it was just like being stuck in the mud if one person just wanted to do that.
So you usually have a stray lead around that you're willing to throw away to get, because it's not a 1-for-1. It seems like, well, 1-for-1, like that's pretty fair, but it's like the one I want least for the one you want probably the most.
Yes.
Because that's the other reason why, and I just want to add this here. One of the big things that I've been obsessed with since the beginning of the game was I wanted people to have the ability to see what you were working with, to have a better idea of what you should target in terms of getting rid of their adventures, right? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, that's where the balance issue really presented itself. But go ahead, Joel. Sorry.
No, that was a really good point, that just led us to figure that it needed to cost two leads. It needed to have a negative tempo for the person doing it, because for the two leads of your choice, you're getting to see your rivals' whole hand and choosing the best lead to take out of it. You could strip them. You could take them off of a thwart. You could take them off of breakthrough, especially near the end of the game when that might be the thing that's going to win the game for them. You can see if the adventure they're about to complete, you can just take away that one lead that they need. It's like they have so many ruins, but only one myth, and they need that myth to complete the adventure in front of them. Just take that myth away from them. It just sets them back on tempo so strategically, and it's still not. I would say you go games. You could go into a couple of games without anybody infiltrating, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it really takes a certain play position to get into for Infiltrate to go online and be a good strategy and a good ability to use. But when you need it, it's a game changer. It changes the entire tempo of the game.
Yeah, so, you want to infiltrate more than you do. It's just that finding that window where you have two extraneous leads that you're willing to give up. That's one of what I think makes the game great. Is like, you're constantly faced with these resource management decisions, and yeah, you might want to know what's in their hand, but do you really have two leads that you can give up for that?
Yeah, and you could end up really stepping in it if those two leads that you gave up might have completed the next quest the next adventure that you revealed on the beginning of your next turn. So it really is there's this term in fighting video games called footsies, where you have to kind of like try to get as you try to walk closer to your opponent to bait them into walking closer to you, so they enter your attack range first. And I do feel like in this game, when it's being played at a really high level, you almost have that sort of push and pull. It's like, do I step closer to my opponent and potentially open myself up to get hit or to fall behind, or is this the right move? Will I find the opening and really set them back? So I just really enjoy how that particular feat plays. And then I do believe we do have one more, and that is like, yeah, and that is I would say this feat changed the game. There was this concept, Danny, that you brought up early on, and we were having a little bit of dilemma with it after once we got into this. Once we had our prototype set up and we were play testing with different people. One thing that you constantly brought up was we need the game to be sticky. We need people to feel like they want to come back to play the game. We need them to feel motivated to play the game on their own, not just that they are humoring us by playing the game that we created. And I would say after a particularly insightful playtest with your brother and his girlfriend that we observed, their big thing coming out of it was we want to play more Action X cards. And we knew that Action X cards were basically the juice of the game. Like, the game is really solid if it was just use leads to complete adventures. It would be a really simple but still probably playable game, especially for like mass market or families or young kids. But we knew the Action X cards were the cards that really brought it to the next level, feeling like something exciting and different. And we knew that we wanted to get people more access to them. So we did make a change, and two changes at once, which we rarely do. We tried to change only one thing at a time, but we decided, okay, at the beginning of the game, you're going to get a Action X card. You just get one off the top in your opening hand. And that definitely, got people a little more intrigued about the game. But then we created the special player action, or the heroic feat, called Breakthrough. And what Breakthrough says is you can discard 3 matching leads in order to draw 1 Action X card. And that basically gave the players their own agency, their own ability to shape their hand. If they wanted to, they could shape their hand or spend excess leads if they're flooded to draw those really coveted and really interesting and game-changing, some might even say game-warping Action X cards.
Absolutely. And there are a couple factors here with Breakthrough that I think are important. And one of them is there are games where you might play that you'll never break through. Like, you may never even attempt to break through. But, there are going to be games where, maybe it's not advisable to break through, but a player likes drawing Action X cards. That's what's fun for them in the game. And having the ability to play the game towards more Action X cards, even if that's a suboptimal strategy, that's cool. We want people to be able to have fun the way they want to have fun. And so giving them a tool to constantly access that deck, even at their own detriment, was something that we were highly motivated to do. But there was one other element of Breakthrough that I think was important to the game, and this was something that you raised early on and had kind of been a sort of lingering problem that we wanted to solve for the game. We didn't feel like it was something that had to be solved, and that was, could we devise a organic alternate win con that was not warping to the game and was not going to take precedence over the primary win con, but was still attainable somewhere around 10% of the time. And Breakthrough solved that for us. We didn't get there right all at once. It took a little tinkering, but eventually we found a way to make Breakthrough an alternate win condition. Do you want to explain how that works?
Yes. So with Breakthrough, in the text, when you read it in the Quick Start Guide or wherever you find it, it says that you get to you discard 3 matching leads and you draw an Action X card. And then if you have 7 Action X cards between your action zone and your archive zone, and remember, feats, when you use a feat, it goes to the archive zone. When somebody sabotages your site, it goes to the archive zone. So you're keeping those in your archive zone to keep tally of your Action X cards that you've played that game. And if you have 7, you win the game. But it does have one stipulation that was very important for us not warping the game completely to turning it into the breakthrough game, which was you do have to be in the final quest. I'm not sure if we've explained the final quest in this podcast, but essentially you would have had to have completed 4 adventures. And then once you've completed 4 adventures, then you can use that breakthrough victory. We can spend another episode of this show going over even more details about the heroic feats and why we made the decisions we made, the costs and everything like that. But I think the final aspect of the heroic feats that both gave them their name and turned the game into truly being as sticky as it is that it's right there in the name. They are feats. Thort works on all of them. If your opponent tries to dig within and you don't want them having those 2 extra leads, you could thwart them if you so choose. You don't want them getting that, the breakthrough victory does not work if somebody thwarts it. So that, I think, turned the game into being that very competitive. I kind of describe it as being much more similar to boxing and chess than other games that I've played. And I think it's because you always have that thwart option. If you can keep it up, you can really sucker punch your opponent, even when they're trying to do one of these basic, catch-up mechanics or alternate win conditions.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
To kind of round this out, somewhere in that process, not necessarily after figuring out everything we laid out, but we did, after we got the theme together and we started developing the heroic feats, we brought it back to Patrick.
Nathan, I think we had 5 of 6 when we brought it back to Patrick. Breakthrough hadn't come out yet, but
Breakthrough hadn't come out, and maybe Infiltrate was a little different. But we did bring it back to Patrick, and this now we'll talk more about this side of the process next week. But he was seeing the cards now with artwork, with specific frames, specific fonts. All the names were unique. This went from being black and white cards, white cards with black text and black clip art, to being like full colored cards in his hands. And do you remember how Patrick felt the first time we came back to the game and showed him how far it had come?
I think that he certainly was, a little impressed by the changes to the game. But I mean, I think we'll have to ask him in a future episode. I'd love to have him on to kind of just talk about it from his perspective as an outsider, kind of seeing it. And then, there are certainly some major contributions that Patrick made to the development of the game that I think I'd love to talk to him about.
Yeah.
More than once he broke the game. So
yeah, I was going to tease that actually, that in next week's episode, we are going to continue this story because we do still have some major aspects of this journey to cover. Next week, we are going to be getting into the business of making the game, using Midjourney to create art assets, my own journey learning to be a better designer and laying out the cards. But I think we'll also have to tell the story about the 2 times Patrick found game-breaking bugs in our design that we are so happy he did. Otherwise, we would be shipping a much worse game. So that's going to be part 3 of this series that we'll cover next week. But why don't we go ahead and start wrapping up the show now, Danny? You like to finish this off. You like to give us a little dessert here at the end of the show. Why don't you go ahead and hit me with it, because I am not ready at all.
Well, one of my favorite pastimes for the last 20 years is asking you questions and playing games, often with you.
Yeah.
And so I've devised a little game for us to play. And I have numbers 1 through 15.
Okay.
Each of them have a question associated with them. And some of them are questions that Oliver, my son, has come up with. And some of them are questions that I've come up with. And let's have you pick a few numbers, and I'll ask the questions. And let's see how you do. I'm going to give you, let's do 3. 3 questions seems like a good number.
Yeah, it seems like a good number to me, too. I think if you went to 5, I'd probably start going a little batty. Well, let's start off. Let's see how lucky I am. I'm not so lucky in love some days, but I do like to lean towards luck. So let's go with lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7. What is your favorite rock band?
That is a really interesting question because then we get into the whole like what is a rock band kind of thing. I would say the band that I keep coming back to decade after decade, like my 20s I had a favorite rock band. That was the Flaming Lips. In my teens I had a favorite rock band. That was the Rage Against the Machine. But I there's a rock band that I listened to as a teenager that I loved, as a 20-year-old I loved, and now as a 36-year-old, I still return to their albums. I'm going to have to go with Radiohead.
Okay, that's defensible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see how your luck persists here.
Well, now I'm going to go. Now I'm going to try to kill the beast and go ahead and get rid of the unlucky number on the table, number 13.
Number 13. What what animal not typically eaten would you most reluctantly eat?
Most reluctantly? Like, this is a. What does that even mean? Because, okay.
Let me break it out.
Yeah.
All right. What animal? So we're
Yes.
looking for an animal.
Of course, yeah.
Not typically eaten. So an animal that people don't normally eat.
But they
Would
will.
you-
Like, we're not, because there's a lot of animals that people do not eat. So I'm assuming I don't have to choose one of those. It's like, this is like you go to a foreign restaurant and you're like, oh, what is this? And they tell you which meat it is and you're like, oh no.
I would say that this is not typically eaten. I'm looking for an animal here that almost no one eats.
Almost.
And
Well, I have my first answer, and
Okay.
it actually kind of goes back to our last episode when I was because I became aware that there was something called turtle soup when I was a child, and the idea that you would eat. I think I was kind of fascinated when I was a kid, but the older I get, the idea that somebody would eat a turtle is just like, I know, like, we all have our favorite, the cuter the animal, but there's something very barbaric, like those things. You have to really, really want to, take apart a turtle. Like, there's other animals that you can dress and get so much more efficiency out of. Like, to get through a turtle's shell to get to what little meat they have, it's just, I can't imagine
you really have to work to take part.
Yes, exactly. I don't want to get into the gritty details, but folks at home, imagine actually trying to eat a turtle. There's so many animals that the barrier of entry to get to their meat is so much lower. It makes sense that we went after them.
I'm going to give you some bad news here, Joel.
Yeah.
I think turtles are too typically eaten.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So I'm not accepting that.
What animal? Okay, I'll say this one then, because I have a soft spot. I think, it was only recently that I came up with this. I used to say that my spirit animal was a bear, and which might still be kind of true. I do maybe have some bearish tendencies when it comes to my, or at least I used to my hibernation cycle. But now I just have. Every time I see an elephant in the news and everything, or like on Reddit, elephant gifs just get me. Every time I learn a fact about elephants, it makes me want to cry. So the idea of eating an elephant or hurting an elephant is just beyond me. So I do too many people eat elephants?
I don't think so. I've never heard of anyone eating an elephant. It
Yeah.
seems quite barbaric. So.
I'd rather eat an airplane or a shoe, because that's a turn of phrase. You have to eat an elephant one bite at a time. And it's like, no, I can eat a shoe one bite at a time, but not an elephant.
Okay. So there is a scenario in which you would eat an airplane?
If it's a choice between an airplane and an elephant.
Okay. Well, this is giving me some ideas for future
Okay.
episodes.
All right, so I think that leaves one more question, correct?
Yeah. So what's the number?
I chose two special numbers, so I'm going to choose a number that I personally don't consider as special. And now that I think about that, I kind of like, I have a narrative to like the first like 20 numbers, so that's probably not true. But I think 15 is like not that special of a number, so I go ahead and go to 15. Let's see where your juices were like you're running out of gas in the tank.
What's one place you would never want to travel to?
That is a very interesting question, because I'm not much of a traveler, period. So I only have like a handful of places that I've actually thought, man, it'd be cool to go there someday. You know what? Can I make it a broad one and just say any active volcano?
That's a disappointing. I've been to active volcanoes. They're pretty cool.
Okay, well, I'm okay.
I'm going to take you to an active volcano now.
Okay. Well, that'll be for our travels, for sure.
Yeah,
There's that like supposedly that island made of trash in was it the Atlantic Ocean?
the Pacific Plastic Patch or
Oh,
whatever.
is it the Pacific Ocean? Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
thought it was the Atlantic because I thought it came from New York.
I don't know.
Can I?
I
Yeah. Can I say that the trash island?
yeah, yeah, I guess so.
I
Is
would
it a
not.
real? Is it an actual island covered in trash, or just a floating patch of trash?
Yeah. I think it's a floating patch of trash.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, one of the things that we're hoping to do is to go on adventures in the future, and so I have some ideas.
Does it involve me going to a trash island and eating elephants?
At least eating an airplane.
Eating.
I don't know that. I'm not. I couldn't bring myself to feed you an elephant.
Thank you.
I do want to ask you one more question. It's a follow up to one of the other questions that I asked.
Okay.
What animal, not typically eaten,
Yeah.
would you most satisfyingly eat?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I feel like I'm going to get canceled in the comments for this one.
Well, it's an objective.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think.
I'd love to see you get canceled for something really innocuous, but just strange. Like people are like, yeah, I just don't know how I feel about someone ever using those words in that order.
Yes, he would eat that. Oh my goodness, he would enjoy eating that.
I mean, I'm pretty pleased with. It's like really hard to take apart a turtle, but let's see. What animal that's not typically eating would you find it most satisfying to eat?
You know, that is such a good question because I feel like we found all the good ones. That's my personal take on it. It's like we found all the good ones. And I feel like there's some low-hanging fruit that you're probably going to dismiss. Like I feel like enough people eat snake where I can't like get away with saying snake.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's too easy. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're talking like if I take a turn and we make $1 billion on this game somehow, or like just we amass wealth, and then I'm just doing things for the decadence and to say that I did them. I think like there's this bird that supposedly is like so tender and so delicious, but to eat it is like you have to do it covered because it's shameful for God to see you eating it. So like you hide yourself from God. Now I'm not going to say that bird, but I'm going to say like the American version of that bird. And I'm going to say, I think that I would brag about eating a bald eagle.
You want to eat a bald eagle?
I don't want to eat a bald eagle, but if I'm to sit here and say that there's a weird thing to eat out there, I feel like that was the first thing that came to mind. And I feel like there's something about the symbol of eating the American bird. So yeah, that I would eat the bald eagle. I would fully embrace my heritage as a nondescript American.
Will, please edit out anything that makes that seem like a remotely acceptable thing to say. That just really... Man, I have some other questions here that I really want to hear your answers to, but I guess I'll have to save them.
All right, folks. Well, that was something random from Danny, and as always, I feel very morally compromised after having gone through it. So we'll just go ahead and get to the ending of the episode. Thank you all so much, Fortune Seekers, for coming and joining us for the official Mega Moth Studio podcast. As always, you can follow us on Instagram at x_seekers_of_fortune. That's a mouthful. We're also Mega Moth Studios on TikTok. And we do have Facebook pages under both of those names as well. So just search us on Facebook if that's what you're still using, Boomer. But I think that'll do us for this episode. So all I want to say is catch you later, Fortune Seekers.